Hi guys, I'm Karen Rice and welcome back to my YouTube channel. In this tutorial, I'd like to talk to you about creating texture with sponges and with brushes. And the other magical thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just use three colours, and those colours are ultramarine, lemon yellow and permanent rose. I wanted to keep it really simple with this colour mixing, just to show you, just to give you the control that three colours will give you. I really will try to explain everything I'm doing on the way. Anyway, I hope that that's given you an idea what this video is about. So shall we get started? So here is the beautiful photograph, and you can find this on pixabay.com, and I'll have a link for this in the description below. Here are all my wonderful materials. I've got my brushes, my paints, pencil, paper, palette and sponge, water pot and some tissue paper with some salt as well. More details about this will be in the description below, and there will be links for where you could actually possibly purchase them if needed. So first things first, I'm going to draw a simple outline drawing for this painting. Don't always do too much sketching or anything, just have a nice outline. You can do all the detail with the painting later. So I'm just getting in the shape of the river here and some of the sort of detail, just the top of the hedges, etc. I like to use an HB pencil. I don't like it to be any softer because it gets a bit smudgy and dirty on the watercolour paper. Any harder, like an H pencil, can scratch the paper. Some of you I know have mentioned in the comments that you use watercolour pencils, which is a great idea, but my personal preference is a pencil. It's just me. So now I'm just going to start mixing up some washes. As I said, I'm using three colours: ultramarine and permanent rose and lemon yellow. So I'm mixing up some sky colours here. So I've mixed up the blue and the pinks, just variations between them, and the yellow and pink. I'm wetting the sky with this very large brush. Any large brush will do, by the way, an 8 brush, anything, so you can wet large areas. You don't want to use a small brush. So I'm just really giving that sky a good old soak. And now I'm wetting the water as well, just those areas, just for now. So just make sure you give them a good soak. And now I'm adding the yellow first on the horizon, and now putting this beautiful violet colour in the sky and actually leaving cloud gaps, like little gaps. Because it's wet on wet, you get a lovely soft edge. As you notice there, I really pushed my brush into the paint. I really collected lots of paint. The brush I'm using is a size 8 sable, but you can use any sort of brush between size 8 or size 10, synthetic or sable. It's a round brush. I'm putting that same colour now into the water in horizontal strokes, mixing up a bit of lemon yellow now with the ultramarine to paint in some reflections. This is wet in wet, so you want to let those run down. The paper is at a very slight angle. I've got it at about a 15-degree angle so the paint moves down. I'm mixing now the three colours together. So I've got the ultramarine, the yellow to make a green, and then a little bit of the pink to make a darker shade. Slightly creamier so that the paint doesn't run as much and you get a bit more darker shadow. So I'm mixing up some ultramarine now with a touch of permanent rose, just to put a darker wash into the water, slightly creamier paint so it doesn't run as much. And I'm putting a bit of a paler wash now in the distance, just underneath those distant trees. So I'm mixing up now some yellow with the pink, and I'm painting these trees to the left here. It's still wet in wet. This area is still the sky area, so it's a little bit wet. And this paint isn't too wet, it's probably sort of wet stroke damp, so it doesn't run up into the sky. It doesn't matter if it gets a bit of a soft edge, that's fine, because it's quite nice. It shows the tops of trees. I'm just adding a little bit of blue, pink, and just have a bit of a cooler, paler wash, and doing the very same thing to these distant trees. But if you notice that the scale is obviously smaller, and it's sort of a bit more softer edges, and it just looks further away. I've added a little bit more blue to that wash, creamier colour, and putting in some shadows now to these trees to the left and to the centre of the painting. As you can see, the paper is dry just underneath this. It's got a lovely dry brush stroke. I'm making a lovely sort of lovely orangey colour here, just to put some light on the tops of the grasses. That's the pink and the yellow. Look already how much colour I'm getting in this painting. I'm making a lovely limey green here. I'm wetting the foreground. I'm putting in that orangey colour first. That's the pink and yellow, wet into wet, and leaving some gaps so I can put that limey green into the gaps. You can see the painting is already starting to come together. I'm using that little bit of green. Look at me just really collecting all that paint on my brush so it's fully loaded. I've actually had a creamier colour here and just putting this now damp into damp to create some shadows in these foreground grasses. Still using this large sable brush and putting some lovely dark orangey colours in here. It's amazing how many colours you can get from these 3 colours. So I'm mixing up some ultramarine with the yellow here and just putting in a lovely dark green. I'm trying to be as free as I can, as random as I can, so you get these patches of dark on the grasses, damp into damp, just putting a little bit over there on the left as well. I'm using the plastic card now just to scratch into the paper to make it look like sort of distant tree trunks and texture in the trees as well. Here's an exciting technique. I'm using sea salt and I'm sprinkling it into the damp paint in the foreground, and when it's dry it'll create some lovely textures. Now here's a good little tip. I'm using a clean damp brush, and because I've got a little spot in the sky there, I'm removing it with the damp brush and a tissue, and it comes away. Look at that. It's a good little tip. And look, hey presto, no more spot in the sky. This technique I'm doing here now is called dry brush side brush, and you've got hardly any paint on the brush and you're using it mostly on the side of the brush and not the tip, so the paint doesn't pour off the brush. There isn't very much paint on this brush and the paint isn't very wet, it's more creamier. It takes some practice this, so I would try it on a rough piece of paper before you put it into your painting. Now I'm putting a darker shadowy colour at the base of the trees. I've got all 3 colours mixed up together, the yellow, the pink and the blue. There's probably a little bit more blue in the shadowy colour just because it's the darkest colour and it makes a better shadow colour. And I'm just now putting in some sort of tree trunks, just a little bit more texture, and again using the side brush here, putting some foliage into the trees, and I'm using the tip of the brush there. I just put some more tree trunks in, but just building on that texture. I've mixed up all 3 colours again, mostly the blue, touch of pink, touch of yellow, and I'm putting in some darks now on the riverbank just to create some lovely shadow colours. As you can see, there's a bit of texture there, but I've got this size 4 brush. I've got it quite fully loaded, but the paper is so rough, it's given me some lovely textured edges there. Again, you saw I use the side of the brush. I really like that, creates some texture. I'm doing the same thing here to the left. I'm used mostly there the pink and the yellow with a touch of blue to make a really dark, dirty orange, but I'm trying to build up now a little bit more detail to the left hand side of the painting. I'm mixing up an orange here, that's the pink and the yellow, just putting a touch of lovely colour on the top of those dark grasses, using the point and the tip of that sable brush. I'm using a very watered down greyish colour. That's all 3 colours mixed up together just to give a little bit of detail to the distant trees here. You don't want to make it too dark and you certainly don't want to make it too colourful because it'll come forward. So you want to make it greyish looking, and the way to do that is to mix the 3 colours together so that they neutralise each other with a touch more blue just to make it look cooler so it recedes. I'm using now that little plastic card again just to pull out this damp paint sort of just so you get some more lighter grasses. So I'm going to use a sponge here. It's a natural sponge and I'm going to use it to paint the foliage of the trees. But before I do this, I'm just going to sketch in this main tree with my pencil and mix up some of the pink, the yellow and the blue. So again, it's quite a neutral sort of green. It's not a bright sunny green. I've just wiped off a bit of a splodge there before it dries. Keep an eye out for that. But I'm just pressing this sponge very gently on to make the foliage for this tree here. But I'm just mixing up now some darker colour, and this is to paint the tree trunk in. This paint's quite creamy, and I'm using the size 4 pointed sable, and I'm just going to, just as you can see, I'm painting the little branches there using the point of the brush. And just take the pressure off the brush when you paint these very small branches, or use a rigger or a liner brush as well. or even a twig. I haven't used my twig today, but that'll be just as good. I'm actually using my fingernail here to scratch off some of the dark paint to show the light coming from the right, which is quite a good little thing, but you can use the plastic card as well. I'm just very gently sponging now this last bit of foliage just to finish off the tree. So you can see using these three colours, you start to get more control. I'm mixing up the ultramarine with the yellow there, mostly ultramarine to make this lovely dark green. The paint's slightly thicker and I'm just sponging that gently on. I've now put a bit of pink in there as well, and I'm making the colour really dark for some of these foreground darker grasses using the size 4 sable and just painting it on, just sort of flicking with my brush. The further the grasses go away, the smaller the grass is, if you see what I mean. So it gives it that scale. So the ones that are nearer to you, make them more detailed and make them bigger. And that way it gives the illusion of depth in your picture. I've actually started to put some little bits of detail on the grass as well, so it's not just plain old grasses. As you can see, the ones near the riverbank there, I'm just making them slightly lighter, slightly thinner, just to make them again look further away. Put a touch of detail there. It is in the photograph as well, some of the texture and things like that on these foreground grasses. So again, it's just mainly the ultramarine with the yellow, maybe every now and again a touch of the pink to make that colour even darker. And the consistency of this paint is, it's not watery and it's not thick and creamy, so it's that in-between sort of consistency. It may look like the film has been speeded up here, but I actually paint this fast, so I'm actually thinking to myself, I need to slow down a bit. So I'm going to make up a nice creamy yellow. I'm just masking out the rest of my painting as I spatter this lovely yellow in the foreground to look like buttercups, and I'm doing the same thing, mixing the pink in with the yellow to make it look like some other wildflowers. Do make sure that you do put something over the rest of your picture to protect it. So I'm painting in the reflection here now with ultramarine with a touch of yellow, wet on dry using the small brush and just open-ended brush marks, and I've just softened that with a damp brush now so it looks like movement of water. I've mixed a bit of pink in with that dark green just to create a little bit more dark just on the bottom of that riverbank there, and putting a few little marks, water marks in the water with that dark colour. I mean, it is scary going into a very light watery area there, so I've just softened that again with a damp brush. I'm using that same colour just for a few little final bits of detail in the foreground. I put a tiny bit of yellow there just to soften things, just a few more touches, and I'm going to take off the masking tape now just to see if I need to do any more painting. I'm just going to put a few final touches now. I've got that white border and it's helping me see if I need to do any more. So I just wanted to put a little bit more around this reflection with the tree as it being the focal point. It's important. So just a greyish blue there. I'm doing the same on the horizon there, on the distant reflections as well, just a little bit of reflection of the trees there. I mean, I forgot about the reflection over there, there's so much going on. Just putting the final bits of reflection of these grasses. I think I'm going to leave it there for now. I'm quite pleased with it, and I'm a little bit afraid if I do any more I'll mess it up. So I hope you enjoyed that video. I think it's packed full of techniques. Sorry about that. But it's really got a lot of texture. It's got a lot of landscape rules, you know, pale distance and texture in the foreground. So I've gone a little bit OTT on the sort of techniques, but I hope that's helped you. So here's the picture here. And as you can see, it's got lots of variety of greens here, darks and light greens, loads of texture. I'm absolutely delighted with it. So thank you so much for watching. I do hope you've learned something from the video. Please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel to get updates of my latest videos. Happy painting. Bye for now.